What is the best brand for wedding photography? The ultimate battle. Is it Sony? Is it Canon? Is it Nikon? Is it Fuji? I feel like we've already done this question as a musical. Is Sony or But now it's time for the non-musical version that makes a lot more sense. And just a quick mention, this video is sponsored by Focal, a company that I'm a part owner of. More on a super cool thing that the team has done for wedding photographers coming up later in this video. I'm going to do my best to remove any bias, like how Sony does the best trips, and go through the real pluses and minuses of each of the brands. For transparency, I have photographed over 1,000 weddings in my career. You can get an audiobook about it. And I've used all the brands that I'm going to talk about today. I've also done weddings on their latest pro-level mirrorless cameras, so I do think that I'm credible enough to make this comparison. Oh, and also, this is a totally new channel for just wedding photography, so if you're joining here for the first time, maybe consider subscribing if you're into the wedding photography thing. A few things to keep in mind while watching. If you already own expensive lenses that you like from a certain company, it will probably end up making more sense to stick with them. All the brands are so good these days that no one really has a massive overall advantage. This includes autofocus, colors, and the files. While Sony and Canon do still have the best autofocus in my opinion, the differences are becoming very marginal. Where the advantages and disadvantages come into place is for your specific self, as well as your image and ergonomic preferences. Also, I'm sorry in advance for any Pentax, Leica, Panasonic, or Olympus users for not including the brands here. They're not usually in the mix of questions I see on the main channel, so I have left them out. Right now in the industry, the two most common choices for wedding photographers seem to be Canon and Sony, backed up both by what I see here on YouTube as well as sales metrics. So let's talk about both of them first. Canon, I shot two Canon R6s as main cameras from the fall of 2020 until January of 2022. While the Canon R6 Mark II has come out for wedding photography, there are honestly not a whole lot of advantages above the original. So I would say save the money and get the original R6 or maybe a used R6. In January of 2022, I switched over to the Canon R3, which is their gripped pro body. That camera is not necessary for wedding photographers, but I was doing a lot of action sports over the winter and it was really nice to have. For bigger bodies, only Canon and Nikon make them right now. One of the best things about them is their larger batteries. In my 8 months with the Canon R3, I don't think I had to replace the battery a single time on the wedding day, but that convenience sure does not justify the cost. The Canon R5 is also a great camera if you want some more megapixels, but for weddings, I am very happy with the R6 megapixels. Canon has made some really incredible cameras since 2020. Now, where the deal falls apart a little bit for me is their current lack of third-party options for lenses. I love their f1.8 primes and their 20 to 70 f2, but everything is just so large and expensive. While they do have some cheaper f1.8 options on the market, I really wish they would go back to producing f1.4 glass. I find those lenses the best balance between budget and weight. For Canon business reasons, I suspect it's unlikely to see any f1.4 lenses in the near future, since they're clearly making a hard divide between their very expensive and heavy L glass and their cheaper entry-level primes. Now, there is word that they're going to be opening up the mount to Miyake. I've never had to say that word out loud. Shout out Photo Miyake to make lenses for, but as pure speculation, I suspect Canon isn't going to let them design anything that will truly compete with their Canon RF line. Now, on this third-party lenses note, there is one lens that I kind of consider to be the best lens for wedding photographers ever made, the Tamron 35 to 150 f2 to f2.8. Canon won't let Tamron manufacture this lens for their RF mount, so that it's very sad. You forgot about the second camera, didn't you? But I understand it from the business sense that this lens would directly eat into all the Canon sales of the 24 to 70 as well as the 70 to 200 because it kind of combines both those lenses, at least for me, into one. Samyang also make a wonderful 85mm f1.4 for RF that I would love to use, but Canon has since went after Samyang for creating an unauthorized autofocus lens for their RF mount. So you can't buy that one anymore. And it's too bad because this Samyang lens is my favorite lens for the entire Canon RF system, as mentioned in the musical as well. The Samyang 85 1.4 AF is the best lens for your system. So for positives, Canon, great cameras, great lenses. Negatives, expensive and heavy if you want to get into the premium glass, and no third-party lenses as of right now. Quick focal insert here. Put a yellow bar on the bottom here. If you want to skip this, you can. So starting right now, Focal has a thing called Instablogs where you upload your regular carousel post on Instagram and then you can just quickly in a couple of seconds, build a blog post for your website from that Instagram carousel post. It's amazing, and I really want you to try it. Until Monday, November 27th, which is Cyber Monday, you can get Focal blogs included if you sign up. Otherwise, it's going to be a few $100s per year. And this is absolutely an offer that is never going to come back. So if you're looking for the best place to create a website that's easy to build and get a booking system that you can take payments from clients and default contracts that they can sign, and a place to host your wedding photography galleries all in one spot, Focal is the answer to that. There's a link down below if you want to check it out. Now on to Sony. Sony kind of came from nowhere and just absolutely dominated the market. It's also led the autofocus game for quite some time. Sony is a great all-around option, and I have nothing negative to say about them for wedding photography. Great lens choices, including newly designed f1.4 lenses. Their only negative is when it comes to hybrid video. There's a crop on 4K 60 if you're using the two Sony cameras that I would probably recommend for weddings, either the A7 IV or the A7R Mark V. But if you're not doing video, this doesn't matter at all. They also have the Tamron 35 to 150, f2 to f2.8, which makes my life happy, as well as the Samyang version too. Sony is currently the system that I'm using most often. Now, moving on to Fuji. Fuji has always had a great product lineup. Their autofocus over the past year is finally to the point that I am very happy to use it all day on a wedding day. The strengths that Fuji has going for them is in compactness and also cost effectiveness. So if the idea of a big kit doesn't sound like fun to you, Fuji might be the best choice. I can fit a full Fuji wedding day kit in a pretty small bag and my life is pretty happy. Other bonuses to Fuji is that their JPEG colors are amazing. So for a day of sharing on the wedding day, you don't really have to edit them. You can just put them on your phone and upload them straight to social. It's also a cool bonus that you can easily connect a Fujifilm camera to an Instax printer and leave your couple with some photos at the end of the night, or you can put them on a sign-in table or whatever you want to do. Fujifilm X cameras differ from Canon and Sony comparables because Fuji has decided to stay crop sensor. What this brings is the cost and the weight down, but a bit of a negative. For me personally, I shoot all of my lenses wide open apertures pretty much all the time. I love the shallow depth of field look and I almost abuse it most of the time. Well, 9 out of 10 images, you're not gonna be able to tell what's a crop sensor versus a full frame. I am generally happier with my full frame gear for weddings. If you are a Fujifilm photographer or considering them, check out John Branch on YouTube. He has a ton of information when it comes to wedding photography for Fujifilm. Another fun thing about Fuji is that they tend to be the cameras that people using other systems get as their travel camera. You can usually find an X100V or something similar in most professional kits, even if they don't shoot any other Fuji products. On to Nikon. Nikon was the first company I ever bought a DSLR from. I shot them as primary from 2005 up until 2020. While they were creating some pretty good mirrorless cameras, the autofocus wasn't really up to Canon or Sony standard at that time, and I switched to Canon. Now, I'm very happy to say that Nikon is back up to the industry standard for all things. The Nikon Z8 would be my choice of wedding photography camera from them, unless you can find a great deal on a Nikon Z9. And now a bit of a weird positive for Nikon. On Canon, I don't really consider their f1.8 primes to be amazing professional quality, but on Nikon, I love the look that comes off of all of their f1.8 glass. Nikon Z also now has the Tamron 35 to 150 f2 to f2.8, so they get another check mark from me. For me personally, the ergonomics of the Nikon Z8 are also a win. It's a great camera to have in your hand all day at a wedding. Plus, it's very easy to use in totally silent mode because there is no mechanical shutter. The Nikon downside, at least currently with the Nikon Z8, is the cost of comparing a $4,000 Nikon Z8 to a $2,300 Sony A7 IV or a $2,000 Canon R6. It's honestly pretty hard to justify. So now, the conclusion. If you're coming into this with a bunch of Canon or Nikon DSLR glass that you can use through an adapter, it might make sense to just stay where you're at already because you've already invested. The Nikon higher price point on the body might be leveled out overall because you don't have to buy glass immediately to start using the camera. Note, you do need to get a little adapter to go from DSLR glass into mirrorless cameras. If you're at an absolute zero with gear, this is my recommendation. If there is a place that you can go to physically hold all these cameras in your hand before deciding on what to invest in, I would recommend this. Weddings are very long days and ergonomics are important. Now, for my rankings, I'm going to put Sony at number 1 because of their great lens selection and the Sony A7 IV being around that $2,300 price point. The deciding factor for me on putting Sony number 1 is because of the Tamron 35 and also the Samyang 35 to 150 just existing for this mount. Number 2, I'm gonna put Canon there. The R6 is a great buy, currently at $2,000, and you can get an R or an RP as a backup for even less. There are also a number of great inexpensive lenses for RF mounts, or you can adapt any of the older DSLR glass quite easily. And then number 3, I'm making a tie, Nikon and Fuji. I love Nikon lenses and cameras and the images that come off of them, but it comes at an expensive cost currently. For Fuji, you can get a lot for a lot less money. If I was to flip this ranking into the cheapest way to get a budget-conscious wedding photography setup, Fuji would be number one. All the brands are good, and hopefully this helped a little bit with your decision-making. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer them. And don't forget to check out the new Focal Insta blogs. If you get them right now, you actually get them for lifetime. There's more details over on the link, but this is a crazy offer and it is absolutely never going to come back. So if you're looking for that full website for your wedding photography business, as well as your booking system, get paid, and a way to host your galleries as well, go check out Focal, link in the description below.